So we can start with our normal prayer for teacher and student. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great vinegar and energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So, if anybody wants to widen their perspective, widen their kind of mental horizon, it's good to, not only for the sake of widening this perspective, but also as a mental exercise to see things from as many different points of view as possible. The standard example I give is that if you ask a question on a sunny day where the rain has just fallen and moisture is in the air, is it true that a rainbow exists? Or does it not exist? There are many myths about rainbows. And one of the common myths is not only is there a rainbow, but there's a pot of gold at the end of it. And if you're fool enough to believe it, you'll try and chase it. But the more you go and find the pot of gold, the more you realize that the rainbow disintegrates. It kind of evaporates. It's not there anymore. If conditions are right, if the sun is shining, if water molecules are there, if they are refracting the light waves, then because of your peripheral vision, you'll have a rainbow in front of you. But it's easy to see when you shift your angle, the rainbow's gone. And when you go above the clouds, it's gone completely. So to the question, does a rainbow exist or not? You have to make a counter question: from what point of view are you looking at it? So when we're looking at the world through 5 photographic means, including the senses, making a report, what does the world look like? Then naturally, we'll have a restricted view of things. With only 5 photographs available, in order to get a more complete view, we'll have to learn to shift our view. And there are other views necessary. There are other views that are valid. For example, we are not here always. At some point or other, we'll get sleepy. The eyes will close. And then we enter into a completely different world with no requirement for a passport or a visa. We just glide into a world of dream. And there we can have phenomenal views. A monastic Swami can be a married man, be a king with a queen and a palace, and live for 1,000 years. Have vast properties. Somebody without wings can fly in the air. And when we do the dream interpretation practices, you can see some of the dreams are like novels. You can write a book easily. So that's a different world, and therefore a different perspective and different point of view. We don't normally take it seriously because we're looking at it from our limited 5 perspective, our limited 5 sense perspective. And then all of that disappears. The whole thing goes, and we glide down deeply into a dreamless sleep, where there are no 2 things. A kind of amorphous feeling of peace, registered because some other independent entity is looking and can choose to look at what we call this normal world of people and place and events, what we call the waking world, and can review what happened in a dream recall, maybe even derive some lessons from it, where the same ego operates in a seemingly fragmented way as people and places and events and scenes. And then we can register a creative poised area called a blank, which we normally call deep sleep. Which one of these is true? Well, even in the waking state, there are different perspectives depending on the sense organs. And any problem, if you really want to solve it, will have to be viewed from many, many hundreds of different point of views. Look at it from this side and that side and the other side. Sooner or later, a solution rises. Where is it coming from? It's coming from a probing inquiry that will not stop. It just persists. What's the answer to this? Look at it from this point of view, that point of view. We have to have a generosity, a breadth of mind that is prepared to accept unusual positions, not conventional positions. All inventions are from unconventional positions, kind of thought experiments, being prepared to exceed the known limits with the understanding that beyond our normal restrictions, something is there, maybe an area of infinite possibilities. Look at it from this angle, look at it from that angle, and find a solution. This is a very useful thing, not just to cultivate refinement of the mind, a kind of mental exercise in itself, but also for problem solving, but also for growth. Let us take, for example, one of the great South Indian saints and musicians, Tyagaraja. His musical compositions are a great example of how somebody spent something like over 20 years repeating Rama's name. It happens to be occasionally, well, we repeated Ram Nam tonight here at the ashram, being Ekadashi. It's a tradition. And he repeats the name over and over and over again until some kind of trigger, some kind of revelation, some kind of opening happens, where he now finds infinite expressions. And this comes out as poetry. This repetition was accompanied by a steady contemplation, obviously, of the subject matter, namely Rama, and contemplating that entity as a kind of savior, a kind of protector, a kind of example of righteous behavior, dharma. And as he got completely absorbed in his devotion, either before or after its realization, the ideal phrases and tunes leapt over the threshold of his surface mind, and with sublimity, like cascades in giant waterfalls. So the trust, the devotion, or the true devotion, I should say, has ever been a releaser of tremendous creative, different perspectives and energies. And we call this some kind of inventiveness or genius. But actually, it's a result of tapping into an area of creativity, which is always there and enables us not only to look at things in a different way, but to express things in a different way. So songs like Tyagaraja's would help to enter into a world, and if he is a musician himself, they would enable him to stimulate and deepen the aesthetic sense, the sense of beauty, not only in himself, but also in others. So there's a value in it. An artist's view is bound to be just a little bit different, though. You can take an artist's point of view in a painting competition. 3 or 4 or 5 people selected in a line, and they're asked, please paint a particular scene. And everyone will paint it completely differently, from different angles, or different points of view, or different temperaments being expressed. All of them completely valid, but all of them with different angles. Now, if we understand this fully, there's every reason to live with everybody in harmony, knowing that there are different perspectives everywhere, knowing that people are entitled to it, and knowing that there may be some value in it. And that makes us a good listener. It allows us to tap into a sense of harmony, not just tolerance, but also love. Who am I to say the other person's point of view is not correct? I'm only looking at it from one angle. Can I not be broad-minded enough to open that up and search for things deeper? And as I do that, I open up more and more subtle dimensions. And as I do that, it's like a flower opening from a bud, and it opens a little bit, and I get a particular point of view. You see it now in springtime. All of a sudden, a bud appears. And then maybe the next day, or maybe a few days later, some other development is there. Before you know it, there's a flower in full bloom, generous enough to allow the center to be a landing strip for bees, to take the pollen everywhere. It doesn't restrict anybody. It doesn't say, my scent is only for selected people. You have to purchase a ticket. It's generous enough to spread its scent, its fragrance everywhere. Generous enough to bestow beauty on the eyes of everybody, not just a selected few. It's not like an art gallery. So only if you have a ticket you can come in. Only if you've been invited, by invitation only. Not sending out any invites for bees and other things. It comes and everything works in harmony and cooperates. People who know this secret will never wage war with anybody. People who know this opening secret of being generous enough to accept more dimensions than are accessible to us will get a huge internal inspiration. This will be opening up the mental field so much that new, creative, unusual ideas will come out, and they will have a function. There'll be a functionality in it. They'll be able to use it for the good and benefit of everybody. Everybody now can use these ideas. Nobody will claim a patent on it. So there's a great value in looking at things from as many different points of view as possible, as many different ways. And then we can see that there are not different elements which make a uniform standard impossible. Our genius, or the genius of some people in some countries, will be a kind of universality that allows for reconciliation of every idea. But it requires the art of listening, and we're not very good listeners. So what is required in listening? Well, we have to make sure that we don't interrupt anybody, either mentally or verbally. You know the old thing, the old example. I tell somebody that I was at I was about to say airport. The person says, oh, the supermarket. No, I was at the airport. And there I met your cousin? No. I met an old friend from school days. And we talked about politics? No. We talked about the weather. So you can see the person who's interjecting is not really listening. And that means not really valuing the other person. Not prepared to stand in the other person's shoes and see things from that person's point of view and perspective. And when we do that, the heart itself opens. We become empathetic. We learn to see things as the other person sees things. And when somebody says, oh, I'm suffering here and there, we don't just bring out sympathy, empty words, and move on quickly. In some people, they do that. Some cultures, we find it, There was in Zimbabwe, I always remember somebody complaining, my boss doesn't like me. Why'd you say that? It's because I say good morning, he says humph. And I don't know what humph means. Or he says good morning, but he's looking away and he's walking on. He says, how are you? But doesn't stop to find out, how am I? If he wanted to, he could stop and talk to me for hours, because I have a lot to say if somebody says, how are you? So are we good listeners? Most communication is from the heart. Most communication is designed to convey somebody's emotional state. Even if they're conveying things like facts and figures, what they're really conveying is how you want them to be perceived. For example, so try to see the other person's point of view. Now imagine all the world's current problems where people are seeing the other person's point of view, not just for negotiation purposes. Negotiation purposes means I start off an extreme position, the other person starts off an extreme position, and we know somehow we're going to meet in the middle. And we expect that. And we have techniques. I always remember somebody telling me the technique of negotiation is suddenly get up and walk out. And people wonder what happened. Oh, you must have said something. Never mind. He's discussing things with colleagues. He may or may not be back. It's a shock technique. So if we're playing the game like that, well, then we will never really understand the other person. But there's an inner journey to take. And if we're not open to new points of view, if we're simply restricted to doctrines and dogmas, for example, in spirituality, if we're only thinking what are the rules and regulations state, then unfortunately we will never develop, we will never grow. We have to think in different ways. Shuffle the mental field around until we get 100 different thoughts about something. Looking at it from this point of view, looking at it from that point of view, until something opens and yields. Spiritual life is like that. Looking at the various problems, thinking that spiritual life is in response to these problems, we can take things in sections. First of all, we can say, I want my body to be healthy. So we embark on a series of exercises and what have you. And then we might think we need a psychiatrist or psychologist who will tell you all about your past. And as you're telling him or her, the person is writing. Of course, they're not writing notes, they're writing your bill. And then you see that's one field. And then there may be another field that people think is spiritual. I once encountered people who were doing life coaching. They had a wheel and they divided a person's life into segments: domestic, social, financial, etc. And then one of the dimensions was spiritual, as if spiritual were just another fragment of your life. Vedanta says no, it is the very foundation. The foundation of your whole being is spirit. Why don't you start from there? If you start from there, your mental field gets stabilized and your body gets stabilized. You can't avoid it because every thought carries its vibration to its nth degree. If you think, I'm a sinner, I'm unworthy, I'm a worm, I'm weak, that's exactly what you'll be, and the body will be weak. If you have a nervous disposition, expect the breathing to be difficult, expect that you may have some lung complaints, accept that you may have some heart murmurs. If you're holding on to something, you can accept all these things. So why don't we start from the spiritual base first? But first of all, we have to make sure we understand that there is a spiritual base for us. Philosophy tells us that it is so, but our own common sense will tell us also. Our own experience will tell us that at moments of reflection, some kind of inspiration comes. When we shuffle the mental field properly, we get an aha moment, that's it. And we're able to understand and realize our own fundamental nature, even just in a flash, even just for a second. Just a split moment. We can easily register these moments. I'll give you some examples. Seeing a breathtaking scene. There's a reason why we call it breathtaking. It takes the breath completely away. It's a pausing moment. It's a moment of what the yogis call kumbhaka, suspension of the breath. Nothing else is there, and we are stunned by an atmosphere of wonder, an atmosphere of adoration even, and a moment of internal gratitude. We don't try and criticize it. We don't think God should make a different color here and there. We simply insert a level of appreciation inadvertently. We don't plan it. It just happens. And in that current moment, that particular second, we find all the glory that we can ever find. When we're looking for peace, there we find it. When we're looking for joy, there we find it. And when the moment is gone, we look for it in other directions. Most people are looking for things in different directions. Everybody wants happiness. Most people are looking for it here and there. But sometimes that internal moment occurs, that flash happens. We have to be sensible enough to repeat it time and time again until it becomes our natural condition. Imagine if this is our natural condition, where every cell and molecule of the body vibrates well with a shining component, a joyful component, where we are literally the embodiment of peace and health and vitality, because we tuned into a core thing, our spiritual nature, not the other way around, not dealing with the health and then the mental, dealing first with the spiritual. And even if we add dimensions such as domestic and social and all these other things, all of these things get sorted by resorting to our blissful base. Why should it be so? Is there any scientific, systematic principle behind it? Yes, there is. Resorting to the ocean of spirit, the waves take care of themselves. Understanding that the core is the substance called ocean, when we resort to it, then all the other variations of it get smoothed out. And our most supreme thinking, our highest values, our noblest thoughts, immediately get conveyed to the other levels and layers that themselves are manifested from it. What a beautiful, beautiful way of living. But how to cultivate this systematically is only by repeated practice, is only by bringing the mind and the attention back again and again and again and again, because we cannot correct the unconscious mind directly. We have to do it indirectly. We have to do it through the avenue, the gateway of the conscious mind, where it all began. All your unconscious activities arrive to you on the conscious level to start with. And that is biologically, even going back, even to the amoeba, to the bacteria, to the single cell organism that learnt a certain mode of behavior and adapted and increased its memory bank of learning until we arrived at what we have today. It's called evolution. But nothing new was created and there were no randomness involved. Because if evolution is an unfolding, then nothing new gets created. No more than if you fold up a piece of paper and then unfold it. And I'm sure many of these concepts I've given you before. You unfold it, it's not a different piece of paper. Nothing new happened. There was no creation involved. You simply unfolded the thing. And with a twinkle in my eye, when I converse with people who may be atheistic evolutionists, and they say, do you believe in evolution? Expecting a kind of standard Occidental position that either you believe in evolution or creation. I say, no, I cannot believe in evolution because I believe in totality. Now, creation has no totality in it. There's a beginning, there's a middle, maybe there's even an end. Evolution doesn't really have a beginning, it doesn't really have an end in a common sense of the word, because the end and the beginning are exactly the same. In the great philosopher, who was a Roman Catholic priest, Pierre Desjardins, he was a paleontologist, and he was also a philosopher. He writes books like Le Milieu Divin, The Phenomenon of Man, and so on. And he's simply taking the profound concepts of the Orient, these profound ancient concepts found from direct experience of those who went into the interior, as opposed to others who tried to find things outside. Both are necessary. Outside knowledge has to be acquired, and inside knowledge has to be acquired. And he expresses it as the Alpha and the Omega. You can't have something separate. The Alpha and the Omega actually turn out to be 2 points on the same circle. In Swami Vivekananda's example, if you have a circle and you put A and B as points on the circle, you can't establish which came first, A or B, A or B, or B or A. It's like a chicken and egg syndrome. Which came first? There's no first, no second. It's a circle. And any point you find cannot be a beginning or an end. So we're living in a pattern of cycles. And in a cycle, you can't understand what is exactly the beginning. You may establish it's something like a breathing in and breathing out, that there's a pause. It's about the maximum you can say. In cosmic evolution, there is a pause. But the pause is only a pause of potentiality. Like breathing, naturally, something pauses. Or the heartbeat. For the heartbeat to operate, it must be tuck, pause. It pumps and it pauses. Why does it pause? In order to pump again. It's a peristaltic pump. So if we learn the art of this, several things we can say. First of all, we learn about the patterns of life. We learn that there will be pauses, and therefore we understand there's a totality. And this totality is exactly who we are and what we are. We don't have to look anywhere else. We don't have to look into a lost and found office. I was giving a talk this morning, and I was talking about the subject, and it occurred to me there's room for a joke in it. So I told a joke, an Irish joke, which was greatly appreciated here because it has a universal sense of humor. I told him that, in Ireland, people do like to drink alcohol. There was a particular man who nearly had a car accident, and he realized that drinking and driving do not go together. So he broadcast to all his friends and relatives, I will give it up. I will no longer drive again. But he didn't give up drinking, so he was wending his way down an unfamiliar lane. He got lost. And on the corner of a road was a crowd gathered, and there was an evangelical preacher. He says, you should be baptized and see Jesus. And he had a big baptismal font, something like a big pool. And he said, come on, if I dip your head in here, you will see Jesus. And seeing the staggering drunk, he said, let me take him. Because, you see, he will not only see Jesus, but he will also sober up. He said, do you want to see Jesus? And the drunk says, yes, of course I want to see Jesus. He says, then come here. And with that, he took him by the head and dunked his head in the water. Until the man found it difficult to breathe, he brought him up. He was gasping for breath. Did you see Jesus? Expecting him to say, yes, I'm saved, I saw Jesus. in his drunken but euphoric state, he said, no, I never saw it. They put him back in the water, held him under, brought him back. Now did you see Jesus? No, not at all. Oh, put him back again. By this time, now the preacher is extremely angry and says, by God, I'm going to hold this man's head under the water until he sees Jesus. And bubbles were coming up. And he held him up so much down under the water that it looked like a desperate thing. The man was struggling a bit, brought him up. Now did you see Jesus? And the drunkard says, no. Are you sure he fell in? So you see, it's not that God is lost. It's not that he's fallen in somewhere, we have to rescue him. What we call God in religion is fundamentally your own true nature expressed as a cosmic mind. And is this cosmic mind that is the creative aspect of the totality that then, with a suitable framework, combines more and more the condensation of your very thoughts that come from the cosmic mind. There's only one mind, according to our Sankhya psychology. That is also our Sankhya cosmology that every system, including Vedanta, adopts, with 24 cosmic principles. And the 24th, the 23rd will be cosmic mind. And the cosmic mind's creativity manufactures, as it were, from itself, series of subtle waves that combine and recombine in subtle form until they arrive at this waking state that I mentioned before, which is one aspect of reality. You can say actually three aspects of reality. Seeing as one series from the point of view of a witness, a thinker, and a knower. And those thoughts are infallible. They can never stop unless they can change course, if you change your mind, if you insert a doubt. So every resolution and intention you have will carry forward infallibly to the end, for good or bad. That's how the science works. That's how the system works. But these waves are waves of divine glory. These are billowing, shining waves that combine and recombine and configure to get the world that we find in front of it, comprised of scenes, plays, scenery, events. All of these things in front, manufactured from one cosmic mind, creative mind. If there are 24 principles, therefore, there are 24 different ways of looking at something, at least that much. And we can choose where we want to stand and look at it from whichever point of view we choose. So that if we are looking at it from a complete waking point of view, where we see the world in front of us, ourselves on one side, in opposition and combat with all the scenes and people and places on the other side, doing negotiations, trying to get an upper hand somewhere, trying to overpower somebody in some situation, with no empathy, no understanding of the other position. If that is our world, it will be a problematic world, not only for ourselves, but every other person around us. Oh, that person is such a problem. Well, all right, see. Firstly, if you see the person as a problem, perhaps you're doing something like a projection. What is a projection? An example is, if I walk carelessly and bang my leg on a table and say, stupid table. Well, I have to tell you, a table is neither stupid nor is it wise. It's not intelligent. It's not foolish. A table is a table. It can't answer back. Instead of blaming your own foolishness, you rather blame the table. That's our position. So we should take responsibility for all the various combinations, actions, and interactions that are before us. And when we do that nicely, we first of all learn to take responsibility and raise ourselves up by ourselves. Instead of blaming the weather, instead of blaming somebody else, instead of blaming the table, instead of blaming our friends, instead of blaming life and the universe, instead of blaming God, we should take full responsibility. Therefore, we have to learn to shuffle our mental field in such a way that we revalue everything with a positive outcome. Knowing that the creative cosmic mind will organize all these divine graces and glories, combine them and recombine them, commensurate with our own thinking. That is the way to produce harmony. What are these 24 areas? 5 sense organs are there, only 5 photographs, we said. But it doesn't end there. There are 5 actions of will, five senses that react, so that incoming information is there and a reaction to it is there. This makes 5 and 5 makes 10. We make one addition called the individual, so-called individual instrumentation, that technically we call an internal instrument, antakarana. So we can call it mind. 16 items are there. And then where do they come from? Do we have any example of it? Yes. We find a big drama in the weather where the heat of the sun evaporates water from the oceans, leaving the salt behind. And that vapor rises and combines and recombines until it condenses ultimately as rainfall. Evaporation, combination, and finally condensation, rainfall. And the cycle continues. That drama is being played. And that drama enables us to live and talk. So, is there another drama like that in the area of the mental field? Yes, there is. So thought, like the sun, is a kind of cosmic variety of the sun that draws up all our individual thoughts and intentions. In other words, all the uses that we had for our steady current. Like electricity is always there. We can steer it here through one adapter or through another. In one place it comes out as electricity. Another place it comes out as something else. Manifested in all these different ways. An example like that. Then you see, it then arranges all the things that you want, just like the cycle of rainfall does it. And ultimately, through these subtle forces, these divine angels that pave the way, that make crooked paths straight for us in advance, they all bring about what we can call the decoherence, is the term in physics. The world of tables and chairs and bodies and so on, which we exclusively think this is our world. There's nothing beyond that, not realizing that underneath are subtle creative forces. And there are 5 of them, so 16 items were there, and another 5 items, and then all senses of individualities are there. That's 22 items in total. Where are they coming from? Cosmic mind, 23. Where is that coming from? An area of potentiality, an area of possibilities that has no particular shape or form. If we were to put it in religious terms, cosmic mind is our personal God. And where it comes from is what we can designate as nature overall, where everything else comes from, our mother, if you like. And that produces the cosmic mind with its first movement that we described as Om. Om is a sound symbol heard by the yogis. It is not exactly Om. Om is our version of it, our materialistic version of it, our audio version of it, as spoken by the voice. But the actual sound of it, the yogis will say, is more like something like a peal of bells, or a bell sound, something completely indescribable in normal terms, yet directly experienced. Have you heard the Om? One famous monk was asking. Yes, I've heard people say Om, Om all over the place. No, but have you heard it? Have you actually heard it? And the implication was he has actually heard it. And it doesn't sound like the human vocalization of it. So this one primordial wave, creative wave, other philosophers call it nous, maybe logos. In the Vedas, we call it Vak Devi, the mother goddess, that Vak, that first word that is spoken, that is that first vibration, a giant wave that combines and recombines into other subtle waves and produces what we have that looks like solid material, but our physics tells us, no, this is also waves. You just didn't notice it. And these subtle waves are called tanmatras. So this 24th component is the overall Mother Nature that includes all the other things, all the other categories. And this Mother Nature, this Prakriti as we call it, this is equivalent to the impersonal God. That is the God with qualities. There we find omniscience, potentially there, omnipresence, potentially there, omnipotence, potentially there, because it comes from an essence behind it. And that essence is described as pure existence, pure consciousness, and absolute divine bliss. Sat Chit Ananda. If it wasn't Sat, if it wasn't existence, it wouldn't come out as a creative force. It wouldn't come out as omnipotence. If it wasn't pure consciousness, it wouldn't come out as omniscience. If it wasn't bliss, then it wouldn't come out as an all-pervading, omnipresent entity. So all of these things have these ties of relationships, which are obvious when you study it, and yet our mind doesn't normally wish to trace it all back. Our mind is searching for an answer, but we're not prepared to look at this whole reality from at least 24 different positions. You can add then that absolute pure being, and you can put it as a 24, number 25. For convenience, you can add a 26th, the individual soul, the jiva, that has some options. It can either tap into, like tapping into honey, it can either tap into it as an individual seeking the devotional nectar, the divine love of a beloved. This is a dualistic system. Or you can connect with it and tap into the divine grace. Either way, divine grace flows. Or you can say, I'm one with it. So that brings us to 26 principles. From which angle you're looking at it. Now we can at any moment, in the busiest of times, in the most difficult of times, we can at any moment, when we are accustomed to it, divert our consciousness within and stand there in a poised position. Stand there in our very core, if you will, and beam from there. It can be a kind of beaming entity where there is no duality, where there is only a sense of pure peace. This is a voice of silence, and even for a moment, it will shift our perspective and solve all our difficulties, even just for the moment. In this eternal now, we'll find it. It's absolute silence. Somebody asked me at a question time here, so they have phrased a question, and it turned out it was a question about silence. Of course, I said I couldn't possibly answer it. How can you answer any question about silence except to remain silent? And the cultivation of silence is useful. It's called mona. Munis are those silent ones, because what to say? When you know the totality, what else is there to say? Anything else will be like so many empty vessels making a lot of din, a lot of noise. So in shifting our perspective, we go deeper, we go broader, we become more and more what we want to be. We're exploring the depths of the ocean where silence itself has many layers, where silence can be deeper and more profound than you can ever imagine. And there we find the revelation coming, the exposition of what is there, which is pure being, just by shifting our position. And then will it have an effect on all these other levels, social, domestic, and so on? I did answer yes, because the whole mental framework will be changed, will be renovated. It'll be like a spring cleaning. You'll be looking at it from a different point of view. Instead of seeing an enemy somewhere, somebody to oppose, somebody to struggle with, or a problem to struggle with, we take it in a different way. We see it as a divine combination of waves, and we see there only the divine glory standing there. Why not? If you have a physical problem, will it change? Yes, of course. You can't simply stop at that mental field. What we call the physical body is a creation of the mind. If the mind is calm and collected, the body will be smooth, rhythmic, it'll work well. The breath will be even. That is why in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Patanjali mentions that there would be that one of the symptoms of lack of concentration brings peace of mind, not anxiety, will be shaking of the body, irregular breathing, grief, disease. All of these things will be the products of wrong thinking. Shift your thinking, change your thinking, see what happens. You can't avoid every cell and molecule of the body vibrating well with your thought. Make your thought shining, illumined. Everything else will be shining and illumined. That does not mean to say you will live eternally in the body. No, the body has its own program. The body has its own resource, or acts as its own resource for you to learn some lessons and use it. You can't have a car forever. At some point or other, you have to replace it by a Tesla something, or 2022 car. Otherwise, rust sets in and so on. It's the nature of it, what Ramakrishna calls, it's the rent for the body, the rent we pay for a body. All right, that's fine. Knowing that, let us try to make the body, in a revalued sense, something like God's useful earth car that we go on our sacred pilgrimage with. And we delight and play and dance with it with great delight. Then won't every single part of the body, every fragment of it also be like that? Supposing we were able to see this world as nothing more than fragmented divinity, something like a reflection of the original divinity, the original glory, the infinite invisible, that entity that is incomparable, that is eternal, that is undivided, that is unchanging, that is glorious, that is supreme bliss. Will not every part be blissful if we see it in this way? Will we not then look at the world in such a different way that we'll be able to calmly manage every situation that is presented to us just by shifting our attitude and therefore shifting our responses? We have to learn the art of doing that. So it is on its way to 10 o'clock here. So it's very late for me, a little bit late. So I'm going to almost leave it at that, but I see there's some questions in chat, and I'm going to unplug my microphone so for people to ask some questions. So let us see some of the questions here. And God is us. That is not exactly true. I'll describe why. When we pray and receive realization, are we receiving these messages from us ultimately? No. And I'll tell you why. You see, what we call as God is a category, one of the 26 categories I mentioned. What we call God is actually cosmic mind. And cosmic mind is the creator, no doubt, and is also the deliverer of whatever we use the cosmic mental energy for. So, to read the question again, when we pray and receive realizations, yes, are we receiving these messages from us ultimately? No. We are receiving these messages from the divine arrangement that is stimulated and arranged by our use and direction of the current which we call thought. We have to avoid a mistake that is often made in the Vedanta philosophy, because nobody in the Vedanta philosophy says, you are God. Simply because we feel embodied, then we can never legitimately say that. What can we say? We say, we are the deep ocean. We are the substratum. We are the substance. We are the gold and the ring, of course, no doubt. But the manifestation of it, yes, nobody will take the place of God. Put it in a different way. Clay is one thing, and you can make a clay elephant. But a clay cow can never be a clay elephant. And Swami Vivekananda gives a definition of what this God looks like. Is imagine a circle whose circumference is nowhere, but whose center is everywhere. What a wonderful, wonderful description. On the contrary, a soul, individual soul, is like a circle whose circumference is nowhere, but whose center is in one place. All right, so then that's the next question. We are the cosmic mind? No. I know this can sound a little confusing, and I hope I asked it well. No, we are, all our thought comes from the cosmic mind. But ultimately, cosmic mind itself is a manifestation. God's mind. No, we are deeper than that. We are the underlying ocean. That's what it is. So some of these terms can get confused. We can, say that there is an infinite invisible. I suppose the Christian mystic Meister Eckhart removed this confusion. He had two terms. One was God, the other one was Godhead. So Godhead is what we are. We are the ocean. But the giant wave that is never lost, is never confused, is never under any spell of ignorance, that manifests its Maya, its world, its network of waves and interweaving things that create a matrix called a world. That entity, no, we are not that. I hope you understand the difference.
Sorry, Swamiji. I'm just trying to. I'm kind of understanding. I think I'm just getting a bit confused because, for example, let's say if someone says, "Oh, I feel like I've been touched by God," let's say, ultimately, if we are the same energy, if we are the source manifested from very different pieces, are we not then that, let's say, evolution, the circle, which never ends?
So you see, there are these three positions that I mentioned before that you can take. Most people think that God is some extra cosmic entity, but in these modern times in particular, nobody will really credibly accept that. People will question it naturally because it brings up all kinds of difficult questions. It doesn't seem feasible. It seems archaic. It seems a caricature of what reality is. What we call God is an entity that is within us, and because of the difficulty of relating to an absolute that has no moving parts in space and no evolution in time, we see that through this network, through this illusion, as it were, of Maya, then the producer of this illusion is the creator. This is God in the creative aspect. But can we say exclusively this or that? No. The whole point of this evening was to say we have to shift our position. We must shift our position. So we can insert some sweetness into that relationship. That God is within me and within everything. We start off with an interior position. God is in everything. But soon that yields to, that entity is like a continuous flow through everything, through all hands, all arms, all heads, all eyes. We can see that flow going through. We can see a connectedness. And then ultimately the realization will be, there is only one thing. But when we see the one thing, we cannot have a God and a this and a that and the other. There's only one. And even the word one is difficult because it implies two and three and four. But it's only a convenience term. And so for that reason, the philosophical point of view doesn't say one. It says non-two, non-dualism, to remove the confusion. We're not monists. It's not that there's only one thing, no, because the possibility of two or three things could be there. No, we are non-dual. There is no duality whatsoever. Do we understand the position? No. That point is a point of realization. And until that moment, we have to deal with what we see and what we have. And the nearest representation, the nearest reading of the absolute that we have is called God. So God, by definition, is the highest reading to the human mind of the absolute. That introduces time and space and all the rest of it and movement. But it is all one thing, no doubt.
So easy. Okay, this is challenging me. So
yes, because you're dealing with something that you may not have experienced.
So that is opening a really big door now.
So you see, the ultimate position has no room for the world. You cannot sit. The ultimate supreme principle is what we call Brahman. When you stand in Brahman, there's no world. There's no relative world. Relative because it's only there in relation to something. Our world is only real to us in relation to the senses. But when we shift our perspective, a different reality presents itself. So this whole relative reality that we're talking about disappears completely when there's an absolute. And in the absence, as it were, or the absence of the cognition of an absolute, the world appears. And when we see glimpses of the absolute and glimpses of the world, that condition, that experience is called savikalpa samadhi. You may have experienced it. You may have experienced even moments of it. But you see, nirvikalpa samadhi, without any cycle, there's nothing else. You can't even imagine it. There's no object to imagine. There's no subject, no object. As soon as you talk in language of subject and object, then you are really talking in some way of the relative world. Yeah. So that's how it is.
There's I mean, the oneness. I'm thinking
What
the
is
way
that?
the way I've the way I've seen the oneness is pure energy, which is light. I mean, it's a
Well,
food
let's
thing.
put it in a more realistic way. It's your imagination. You see, imagine now a totality of energy. It's not the energy itself, it's a representation of it. Nobody will ever say, what is the totality of energy? You can't conceive of such a thing. Or you can conceive of it, of course, but every conception is a representation. So using that representation and that level of imagination, we proceed, and the imagination will lead us ultimately to a yielding of the reality itself. We have to use the faculty of imaging, imagination, forming pictures, sounds, impressions, colorfully formulated, shaped, and expressed. That ultimately will yield the reality itself. In that sense, you can say this whole world is actually our imagination. Okay.
No one, no one can see it
What is
because
that?
my mind has exploded. Is that
Yes, good.
no one can see it really. No one will ever do. There's no
Not,
way.
not with the physical eyes. The physical eyes is only within the restriction of whatever is manifested. We are looking at manifested energy everywhere and interpreting it as matter. Science itself will tell us this. Can,
So
can we conceive of the quantum field that scientists talk about? We can conceive of it. We can imagine it's something like a bubbling glass of Guinness stout with bubbles coming up to the surface and breaking and falling back again. That's what we can imagine. Yeah. But who has seen it? Nobody has seen it. It's just an indication that things appear and disappear. And it was John Wheeler, the scientist, who coined the term quantum foam. Now it gives you an image. So there are many things that we cannot see that we have to use representations of. We have to use symbols of. When people say, here's the atomic structure, they visualize it like a planetary system. But is it actually like that? No, it's not like that at all. But it's useful for educational purposes. That's fine. So take it for conceptual purposes. That's fine. And then it is through practice, spiritual practice, that the opening comes. If you want to see, then you have to practice seeing. You have to go on the internal journey beyond the concept, using the concepts, no doubt, using imagination. So, for example, in the meditation today, it was purely presenting imaginary concepts and scenes. It was presenting beautiful things that naturally inspire something, the corresponding reality that it represents within us. And naturally, we respond to it. Using that repeatedly is called practice. And with that comes an opening progressively until we get the full blown thing. Now, if we're able to sustain that, then we become illumined souls, and we are in a position to share that light with others. Until that time, accept your status. What is your status? I feel that I'm embodied. People say I'm pure energy. I don't feel it. I feel I'm a body. All right, that's a good starting point. What next? Is there an internal source that protects me, that looks after me, that is caring and loving, all the human qualities and attributes that we have? Can we elevate it to a cosmic level so that it becomes divine attributes? Then form a relationship with that. See what happens. And then at the next level of opening up, of natural evolution, of unfolding, then some other revelation called connectedness happens. we connect to that, and it becomes more of a reality to us. Now we're on the path of knowledge, because now we know something we previously didn't know. We know I'm not the body. We know I'm not the mind. We know I'm something indefinable. Don't ask me to describe it, because you have to experience something that we have to formulate symbolically in words, and that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank
All
you so
right. Good, 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 good. So we'll finish there. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.